Hello my fellow Sonicholics, this is your daring dude organizing secrets behind the wheel and driving your ass to Speed Town. Welcome to the Sonic the Hedgehog Zones project. I have a bit of a treat for you today. At least, I hope you consider it a treat. I bring you Sonic Before the Sequel, a truly awesome fan game by Lake Peppered that is set in between Sonic 1 and 2. I know we haven't really gotten into plot stuff from the original game, but we'll actually hit up some Sonic lore as well. Story details aren't really something that the Zones project was made to go over. I want to cover features like plot, mechanics, and the like in a separate series after I get a ways in covering all these zones. The snag is that much of the appeal with Sonic Before the Sequel comes with its plot implications and references, so there are some things I will feel obligated to explain at a very minimum level. However, why do something now that you can wait like 4 minutes to explain? Roll that rating explanation. Something to keep in mind before some of you attempt to stone me, these are my personal rankings for the various aspects of these zones and levels. I'm talking about the things that make my soul feel the good things, and most certainly can't speak or feel for all of you. I'd seriously love to hear what you guys would have given these zones down in the comments, but please, don't track me down and murder everything I love if I happen to dislike something that you love. The rating system itself is pretty simple. Rate things on a scale from 1 to 10. 1 being a death curse of evil, 5 being something I feel neither negatively nor positively about, and 10 being the holy grail of things I love to love. I then take the ratings from everything I have judged in that level and average them together to find a zone's final rating. Easy peasy. While this isn't a ratings-based thing, the first thing I'll do when introducing a zone is to denote what type of zone it is and also if it happens to be the first or final level of the game. We're talking about the general archetype that each zone falls into, so we can see what the general expectations for the zone are and if it subverts them. The first thing we'll be judging is each zone's music. Some zones use one song across all their acts while others switch it up. If that's the case, then we have more music to jam to. I'm a huge fan of Sonic tunes, so expect some general excitement here, and please don't get upset when we have differing musical tastes. The next thing visited on our rating journey is a category I call Area. Area is the way a zone looks as opposed to its gameplay. We're looking at the setting, tone, and actual beauty of the zone. In short, zones with poor level design can still score high here. After Area, we have the Gimmick rating. This is where the stage's actual construction comes into play, as well as where we talk about whatever game mechanics that are exclusive to that zone. Following Gimmick, we have the Enemy rating. This is where we look at the baddies that populate the levels. I won't be giving each enemy an individual rating like I do with the music, but we will briefly talk about each bad bot found in the level before I give you my enemy rating. Naturally, the thing we look at after enemies is the boss rating. We'll take a look at the appearance, uniqueness, and actual funness of the boss and talk about those here. This will be followed by a final score attributed to this category based on how I feel about those things. In some games, there's only one boss song, so we'll talk about that song when we get to the first boss, while other games have multiple boss songs, and I'll talk about them when applicable. So, we've talked about our tunes, our level design, and the things we'll be roughing up in the zone. There's one final category I have to throw at you. That happens to be the fun rating, the intangible feeling of joy that I get when playing a zone. Shitty levels inexplicably end up being fun at times, and the reverse is most certainly true. This is a category of pure taste, so try not to get too upset with me. After this heaping helping of ratings, I add them all up and average them to get you the final rating, which is the end-all for where it will be ranking. I hope you enjoyed the new rating explanation. Now that we have several games worth of footage under our belt, I plan to update it every so often and hopefully keep them a bit quicker this time. The Sonic 1's got the initial first version of the rating video, and now it's time for the next batch of videos to snag this Generation 2 style intro. But forget that, I have plot to explain. So here's the lowdown. The whole reason Sonic and Dr. Robotnik were brawling in the Sonic 1 games is because Robotnik needed the 6 Chaos Emeralds that were on that island so that he can use their powers for evil. Vague and simple, just the way I like it. This game opens up right after the credits from Sonic 1 roll, with Sonic using the Chaos Emeralds to transport to the beginning of this game. Still simple. See, there's even this cutscene at the beginning of the game to show this. Oh, Lake Peppered has peppered cutscenes into the game between zones, so I'll chime in a bit more when the cutscene would play in-game. For now, just remember, 6 Chaos Emeralds were the prize fought over in the first game, and that this game takes place immediately afterwards. Got it? Good. On to the first zone. Sonic Before the Sequel starts with a beautiful zone named Hilltop Heights, and let me tell you, this place actually is awesome. I'd like to think that it does a great job of letting you get the feel for how this game is going to play, and well, let's just get to the details, eh? First of all, Hilltop Heights isn't a hills type, despite having hill in its name. Hilltop Heights actually has a bunch more in common with canyon type zones. It's got tons of verticality and a few bottomless pits, although not as much as the norm, since it is the first level of its game. Still, Hilltop Heights is a pretty and dolled up example of this type, and I love it. Break those standards down, I tells ya. Now, music and area are going to be an interesting beast in Sonic Before the Sequel. You see, each act has its own tune, and in several of the zones, the area in each act changes enough between all three that I could talk about all of them. So here was my solution. I'll talk about Act 1's tune, give it a rating, and let it continue playing while I talk about how Act 1 looks. Then, I do the same for Act 2, followed by Act 3, after which I'll drop the area rating on you. This way you guys get a chance to jam to each song, and I can more easily address the aesthetic of these zones. Damn fan games making my job harder than it needs to be. Grumble, grumble, grumble. Shit, dude. Hilltop Heights Act 1 kicks off and you know that music isn't fucking around. I mean, we've just been playing 8 and 16-bit consoles thus far, so hearing some modern jams that still embrace what Sonic is, well, that's just a thing of beauty. Brings a tear to my eye. Sonic Before the Sequel's soundtrack was done by a small group of musical dudes, and I think their talent shows. So, right, the music. I gotcha. Sorry, there's just so much I feel the need to explain. Anyway, this song has an intense airy feel that has a spring in its step but feels epic due to those church bells. Those bells just give everything this grand feel, like I'm about to experience something deep. The synths themselves are fantastic, one of them bouncing between notes and the other just going strong with its catchy melody. Honestly, there's nothing to hate here. I hear a jam like this and it's persona good. Yes, I said it. Hell, it might even be third strike good. 9.25 for this tasty jam. As for the stage, well, you start out on these mossy, ruin-like highways far above the clouds. There's also this super cool mosaic thing at the start of the game. Everything looks fantastically sharp since they are edited sprites from a few stages from future Sonic games. Sonic sprints down the side of a large hill and holy shit, there's this rad storm going on! Seeing the transition as you run down and enter the storm is a sweet feeling that just isn't something we get in these Sonic games too often. Sonic eventually makes his way back up into the clouds and the storm disappears. Man, this act is bringing that style! Hilltop Heights Act 2 has a jam that is quite similar to the first act. They actually don't always stay too similar, but this one definitely plays it safe. It does add a rapping section to the song and is decidedly more nostalgic. I think it might be the small bits of Green Hill Zone that hide under a softer synth. The way they pop up from time to time gives everything this sad tinge. It's great stuff though, and I gave it an 8.75 because the first song already blew me away, so this one being close in tune sorta blends things in. Act 2 starts us back up in the clouds on those awesome sky highways, but this time, the start isn't full of quite as much pomp and fanfare. I suppose that makes sense given that this is the middle act of the zone. The first act started out crazy strong and we all hope they end strong too, which makes this act the bridge. It sacrifices a bit of style out of necessity for good flow. Or does it? Halfway through the stage, that storm dissipates and we get to see the stun start to show. It's the only big departure from the previous act, but it's definitely a welcome one. Act 3's jam begins to play and they take that wistful Green Hill callback right up to the front of the song. This act is trying to get you to recall with a sad, yet full-on remembrance of journeys past, of times you can't really get back to, but wish you could. Those heavy church bells are gone, and this song takes a much lighter approach than the previous two acts took. Bits of that rapper back from Act 2 as well, so it feels like a full metamorphosis from Act 1 to the in-between Act 2 to the soft Act 3. I give Act 3 of Hilltop Heights a 9, because its appeal to my nostalgia is strong and effective. As for the level, the sun has definitely come out and is starting to dry away the storm. There's now this massive rainbow in the background, and I get why this is the first zone in the game. This is a journey starter. Oh, there's also this neat little wood platform and foliage section that wasn't in the other two acts. So while the area didn't change too drastically from act to act, the initial base setting was already really strong and appealing. The added natural storytelling of the storm eventually subsiding and ending everything with the rainbow brings Hilltop Heights to an area rating of 8.75. Look, the artsy look that Lake Feppard was going for worked on me really, really well. How does Mr. Lake's gimmicks agree with me though? It's clear I like the look of his game so far, but do I appreciate his level design? First of all, It's clear that Lake Peppered loves his style, even in gameplay. There are a few sections of just smooth, aesthetically pleasing running down slopes or hills, simply because it looks nice. Add in some interesting platforming with springs, a few spike traps, and these rising landmasses, and you pretty much have Hilltop Heights. I gave it a gimmick rating of 7.25 because there's not too much here. However, I feel like that's exactly what was intended. This was a zone that was meant to look extremely well and be a relatively smooth ride. It's all about the vistas as opposed to anything of mechanical substance here. So none of the enemies in this game happen to be named. I'm a weirdo who needs things to be named and given an identity, so I guess we'll be coming up with whatever we can to give a name to each face. Bear with me, please. Also, a fair portion of the enemies in this game have an awesome blue color scheme to them. While this is clearly Lake Peppered's style of the time in this game, I like to headcanon that this is a line of tech that Robotnik followed for this game, before moving on to something else after it didn't work. This is basically Robotnik's blue period. Art joke. First up is the Whirly Bonker. Yes, Whirly Bonker. You're making fun of me right now, aren't you? Look, it's a modified Spike Bonker sprite from Sonic & Knuckles with a propeller on it, so it's a Whirly Bonker. They actually don't do anything besides hover, so there's not much danger here. Second up is this Barracuda-like bot I like to call a Lata Missile, based on the fish species Latimeria and Missile. Look, I can be smart, okay? These fish fucks like to hide around in a darkened state before slowly lurching forward and cruising through the air. They aren't crazy difficult, but are sorta placed in areas that will make you hit them. The final bot you'll find in Hilltop Heights is this Motobug variant. Honestly, it just has the green face going on, so I named it the Emerald Motobug. It's a simple name that denotes them from the standard Motobug. There's green. Genius! Anyway, these things don't really act that different from traditional Motobugs, so nothing to worry about here. Except that one at the beginning of Act 3 waiting to ambush your ass. Fuck that Emerald Motobug. One heavily edited bot, a relatively new looking one, and a recolor net Hilltop Heights, an enemy rating of 7.5. I know that seems a little low, but much like the gimmicks, these bots seem to be placed here more as visual dressing for the first zone. I don't hate that by any means, but that doesn't mean it's going to snag a 10. Boss fight time! First things first, every boss has their own theme. We got a lot to cover. This first jam is a jazzy and upbeat piece that I think covers the fight quite well. Things are just starting off, so nothing too scary. There's also a cool bleep bleep synth to accompany it. The fight itself has Robotnik piloting a new vehicle that I've had to dub the Blue Mobile, since most of his vehicles have those blue eyes on them. That's blue spelled B-L-U, by the way. I gotta stay classy. This particular configuration being the Blue Mobile Buggy. It's not a crazy difficult fight either. Sonic races alongside the buggy as Robotnik shoots energy blasts out at intervals. You jump up and hit Robotnik, avoiding the large tire in the back since it will bounce you away, and the energy because it hurts. Towards the end of the fight, the firing rate goes up a bit, but it's never anything threatening. I gave the Blue Mobile Buggy an 8. Man, it just has this awesome good feel to it, coupled with an effective and simple look. It sorta matches Eggmobile H as something I just enjoy fighting. Strong start with this new tech, Doctor. I expect good things from you. So we've played Hilltop Heights, drooled at the visuals, jammed to great music, skirted around some okay enemies, and entered combat with a solid boss. How was it? Fucking great. I don't know. This is a great level to play. Look, I mentioned that Lake clearly made some decisions that cut back in certain departments to emphasize the aesthetic and be a visual treat, and that simple concept is strong. This level is fun to play even with it being a bit on the empty side. It's an experience as opposed to a challenge, and that experience gets a 9.25 from me. The whole game wouldn't get away with this, but as a cinematic first level, I am feeling this 100%. Our first before the sequel zone has reached its final rating time. What did it get? What did it get? Something good? Something great? Something 8.5-ish? I mean, yeah, 8.5. No-ish. So it's a fantastic level that was cut back due to the enemies and gimmicks being on the shallow side. You see, my system works sometimes. The strong artistic slant give it a fantastic score, but the weak gameplay still kept it from being dream tier numbers. Success. Our first big story cutscene opens with Sonic doing Sonic-type things. I mean, he's running around, he's sprinting. These cutscenes are rather basic, but they do get the point across. Oh, what's this? It's Tails! Because this happens to be the game that explains how Tails and Sonic meets up. Whew! Told you there would be some cool plot things. Anyways, it looks like Tails is enamored with Sonic after being saved by him. So now that the cat's out of the bag, I should probably explain that this game has you switch between Sonic and Tails every other zone. That's a bit unorthodox for 2D Sonic games, but does happen in several of the 3D titles. Tails can use his flying ability to get around in this game, giving him a bit of extra mobility over Sonic. Eagle-eyed Sonic fans should also notice that Tails' running animation is noticeably different from how it was when he debuted in Sonic 2 on the Genesis, which we'll be covering next, by the way. Tails' first level is Starshore's Zone, a fairly dense level that makes a bit of use out of his flying abilities. It has some interesting gimmicks and tricks to it as well, and I think that this zone is the true first hint that Lake Peppered is a good game designer, or at the very least, a creative one. Starshore's Zone is decidedly a forest-type level, with that densely packed foliage in the background marking this type. It should be noted here that Lake didn't create his forest zone like proper Sega ones, because a standard forest zone usually utilizes tons of verticality and platforming. Starshore's plays more like a trap-filled hill-type zone. Starshore's kicks off its first act with a tropical beat that contains a groovin' surf guitar and fun woodwind solo. It later has a small homage to Starlight Zone's tune that slips in. The composer, Falk, said that this tune was inspired by the Sega Saturn Sonic 3D Blast soundtrack, which I'm not that well versed in. I definitely enjoy this tune and gave it a 7.75. It's solid to be sure, but it didn't blow me away like Hilltop Heights' first act did. As for the appearance of the acts, unfortunately, they don't really change much between all three acts in Starshores. The area is quite jungle-like as noted before, and lives up to its name by having these star-shaped objects literally covering the entire zone. The second act of Starshores opens with a super peppy and quick tune. This song is speeding along, and hearing it just makes me think that it sounds like such a Tails song. That's a weird distinction to make, but this song definitely captures Tails' innocence that he tends to give off. The tune itself snagged an 8 for agreeing with my sensibilities and pretty much working along with how his later theme songs would sound. Luckily, we do have one new thing that's introduced in Act 2 onwards, the super rad lighted pillars. These are easily my favorite visual element of Starshores, especially since I'm not big on the plastered in stars look that the zone goes for. Since this covers everything for the zone's area, I'll put its 6.25 area rating here, even if that is a tad out of order. I'm afraid that this zone comes across as messy with foliage and definitely weird with the star theme. At the very least, it didn't agree with me. Act 3 kicks it with a disco dance remix of the zone tune that we've been jamming to for a couple of acts now. I'm actually all about this song as it brings the Starlight Zone reference up to the forefront of the tune and utilizes it more often. The surf guitar and junk are all still here, but the drums are kicking harder and there are synths everywhere. This fun song snags an 8.5 for being a great listen. I love the different ways that Falk utilizes this stage theme between the three acts. Since we dropped the area rating a tad bit earlier than the norm, it's time for us to swing right into the gimmicks. First of all, this stage has a ton of springs in it, even for Lake Peppered standards. From what I've picked up, this was to encourage people to try out Tails' flying ability and get the hang of things. There are also these swinging platforms, but they happen to have spikes on the side of them, making them a bit more of an issue than your normal swinging platform. Starshores also contains these modified arrow traps that we will also see soon in Sonic 2. They shoot arrows in a straight line, so avoiding them isn't too tricky. Starshore's main gimmick, however, are these fuzzies taken from Yoshi's Island. When touched, they distort the visuals and audio of the game, mess with Tails' control, and generally make everything harder. To top it off, the areas containing fuzzies are usually filled with spikes and enemies. Starshore Zone managed to squeak in a 7.75 in the gimmick department. This is pretty much all thanks to the fuzzies being an interesting and fresh, if somewhat annoying gimmick. Everything else found in the zone is fairly standard fare, and the level design doesn't do much for me outside of being acceptable. Starshore's Zone boasts 3 enemies, and they actually stick to a yellow and black color scheme this time. I'm proud of Robotnik for getting his color theory on. First up is the Golden Motobug. It's a Motobug. Also, it's gold. As far as I can tell, they don't do anything that other Motobugs don't do, so it's just another recolor. Their tendency to be around fuzzies does make them a bit tricky though. Buzz Bomber in a more traditional B coloring returns. I like to call this variant Bumble Bomber, since the black and yellow reminds me of bumblebees. Like the Motobugs, they aren't deviating from Buzz Bombers too much, but are usually located among the fuzzies to trip you up. The final enemy is an interesting one. It's a black alligator, and initially, I couldn't place the sprite. That's because it's based on a scrapped enemy from Sonic 2 that never made it into the game. The original enemy was called Gator, so this one will be dubbed Ebony Gator. Its main attack is to lob an arcing projectile at Tails that I had a surprising time trying to gauge. 2 recolored enemies, plus the cool implementation of a scrap baddie, get Starshore Zone a safe 7 for its enemy rating. This is pretty much entirely thanks to the Ebony Gator, as this is the second Motobug reskin we've seen, and the Bumble Bomber isn't bringing anything new to the table. Tails has his own reoccurring boss in this game, and it's this orb-shaped robot that takes a variety of forms to combat our new protagonist. I've come to call him Orboss as a sort of vague reference to Orbot from the later Sonic games. You get it, right? Orb and boss? Orboss. Man, Sega should just hire me to name their enemies already. Orboss's first theme is actually kind of threatening. It's a punching dance beat with air raid sirens going off in the back and a hint of danger in the tune. A slightly more upbeat brassy section comes in to relieve the tension though. Falk, the song's composer, said he wanted this song to represent how Tails would feel fighting his very first boss. Oh, I feel it. The fight itself is actually pretty imaginative and in theme with the zone. Orboss attaches himself to one of those stars that's been filling up the zone over the past 3 acts. On one side of the spinning star is an orb that fires energy spheres at you. On the opposite side is a platform. You need to utilize the platform to hit Orboss, who also has 2 rotating bumpers protecting him. This fight can be sorta tricky until you realize that you want to stay as close to the ground as possible. I gave this fight a 7.5. It's really not a horrible fight, but the bumpers made it a tad frustrating at times since it was already hard to hit him off the moving platform. Starshore Zone gets to meet the fun rating. Despite all its mediocre scores, can it manage to still be fun? It was par for the course really. At a 7.25, it manages to barely be considered good fun. The main gimmick being something that fucks with your control of Tails, the stage's muddled visuals not agreeing with me, and the enemies being mostly standard, kinda didn't give me that feeling of fun that I like. But on the other hand, I totally understood the concept of this level being a flying tutorial, completely on board with that aspect of it. Averaging up all these scores gives Starshore Zone a rather predictable 7.5 on its final rating. I'm definitely not surprised. The zone wasn't horrible in the least, it was just exceedingly average with a few high points. But hey, we've played zones that scored much lower than this. Don't fret too much, Starshore Zone. You were a fine level in your own right. Orboss runs away like a punk bitch, so I guess it's time to meet back up with Sonic. Rocky Ride Zone is our next level to jump into, and yeah, it's a place. Honestly, Rocky Ride Zone sort of fulfills the role of token snooze level that you'll see me talk about. Pretty much every game has one zone that I just don't care about, and Rocky Ride is the before the sequel entry. That said, I still gotta tell you what's in the zone, even if it didn't tickle my fancy. Rocky Ride is definitely a more traditional example of the canyon zone type as opposed to Hilltop Heights' more experimental approach. Tons of verticality here, and the setting is spot on. Expect some tricky platforming as well. Act 1 of Rocky Ride Zone opens with a bluesy rockabilly tune, and I'll have to be straight up honest in telling you I didn't like it. It reminds me of Biggs the Cat, and I don't really like Biggs the Cat at all. Can't wait till we get to him being playable. Anyway, I gave this tune a 5.75 because while I don't like this song, it's definitely not bad, and I totally understand why it pairs up with the stage. Act 2's jam goes for a more funky big band style, and this time I thought it was way better on the ears, although there's something about the main tune that still rubs me the wrong way. This act received a 6.75 for tidying things up for my earbuds. My Biggs trauma was a bit much for it to overcome though. Unfortunately, this is one of those occasions where my personal taste is fucking with things, and I'll just have to be upfront about that. My music ratings will just have to include my natural dislike for these tunes. Act 3 bumps up the snazzy band section, but once again it's not meeting my ears properly. I like about 20% or so of what I'm hearing, and that's actually less than Act 2. Act 3 gets 6.25 for taking out the really catchy bass from Act 2. Look, I'm still feeling kinda bad about these scores, but the music ratings have always been done by how much things give me goosebumps and make me tingly all over. I was a bit kinder on these 3 tunes than I'd normally be, since I know they aren't bad songs by any means. Forgive me, everyone. Please don't bounce if you happen to like these tunes. Now, as you may have noticed, I didn't go into the area for each act, and that's because there are no big changes in Rocky Ride Zone. All 3 acts pretty much look identical in terms of visuals. As for the visuals themselves, well, they are pretty standard for a canyon zone. Dark purple mountains in the playable area, gray mountains in the background, lots of rocks in general. The one part of the stage that I actually do like from a visual standpoint is the little temple palace structure that's perched on the background mountain. That building basically saved Rocky Ride from a 5 and bumped it up to a proper okay 6.5. Everything is alright, it's just not good or great. A lot of Rocky Ride's level design is on running along strangely oriented slopes, platforming using these orbs. The damned spike ball half pipes from Spring Yard Zone happen to be here for some reason. Throw in a bunch of floating platforms, cover those orbs in spike balls, and you have the stage in a nutshell. If that nut was covered in spikes and pissed me off. I think you're all starting to notice that the zone reminds me of Spring Yard. To Rocky Ride's credit, it did let me run along some massive earthen dicks, and for that I gave it a 6 for its gimmick rating. Actually, that was the one good thing about Rocky Ride. It let you run along some pretty bizarre geometry that not a lot of Sonic games cover, phallic or not. Rocky Ride boasts 2, maybe 3 enemies, depending on how you look at it. Let's save the best for last. First up, Golden Motobug. Yeah, Five Nights at Freddy show. Blah blah blah. We saw them last zone, you know what they do. Next are these flying Motobugs that have actual wings. Since they aren't cruising around on a tire, I've decided to call them Flutterbugs. They rapidly fly back and forth, and I kinda actually like these dudes. A little. Don't tell them I said that though, baka. Our third enemy, and also third Motobug variant, happens to be these blue-shaded Motobugs that bum rush you like little bastards. I've taken to calling them Cerulean Motobugs, and it's actually hilarious when they miss you. Just sorta embarrassing when I still get hit by them stuck in a wall. Our actual new enemy for this zone is this mole thing that lobs a projectile at you. I've taken to calling them Moltars, like a mole and mortar. Also, it's the name of a character from Space Ghost. Not that any of you would know about that. Damn my niche interests. 3 Motobugs and a mole claws Rocky Ride to a 6.25 enemy rating. Barely. And that's mostly because I like the Flutterbug and Moltar. Barely. Ooh, cutscene before the big boss. Well, looks like you now know the big plot of this game. Sonic meeting Tails, and us getting to see the Death Egg being constructed. You know, that thing that will become crucial to the plot for the rest of the Genesis games. So I wasn't feeling the big band rockabilly thing for Rocky Ride, right? I actually don't mind it for the boss fight, and actually thinks the tune they concocted for this zone is really great. The whole thing suits Robotnik. Speaking of the fat man, this time his Bluemobile Hot Rod is looking to take Sonic down, and it's another pretty solid running fight. Actually, most of Sonic's fights revolve around sprinting, while Tails gets the stationary fights, and I love this distinction. This fight has Robotnik dropping energy on the ground that Sonic has to hop over, nailing the bright blue weak spot. Hit it enough times and it disappears, which makes the Bluemobile Hot Rod drop energy faster. Sonic needs to hit Robotnik now, so the jump is a bit higher as well. The end of the fight gets a little nuts with how quick the energy drops, but Robotnik goes down eventually. I mean, he has to, right? He's blowing up to the tune of a cool 7. Rocky Ride Zone gets to find out if it was fun. The answer was yes. Actually, the fun rating was the highest score that Rocky Ride got with a 7.5. I mentioned that the one gimmick I liked in Rocky Ride was running fast along all the weird geometry. Luckily for me, that's pretty much the most prevalent gimmick. I got to go fast, for a time at least. See, it's not all negative here in Rocky Ride Zone. The final rating for Rocky Ride is a surprisingly mild 6.5. Or rather, not that surprising, since I gave it so many scores in the 6s. I just couldn't kill the zone over its music. 6.5 is fine. And that's how I feel about Rocky Ride. It's fine. Just fine. So, can I play a new zone now? Please? Back to Tails pining over our ever-blue hero, but it looks like he hits a bit of a snag. Oh boy, Lost Levels Zone. One of the reasons I implemented the special area rule for before the sequel. The cool thing about this zone is that each act is based on a different zone in Sonic 2 that was scrapped and never completed for one reason or another. I decided to denote Lost Levels Zone as a multi or multiple type zone due to the fact that each act is vastly different from each other. Act 1 is a classic underground area, Act 2 is forest done more traditionally than Star Shores was, and Act 3 decided to be both a desert and ice level because fuck my rating system, I guess. Lost Levels Act 1 kicks in and it's a rather somber orchestral type piece. Definitely a bit different than what we've heard up to this point. Something I like is that there are water splashing and dripping sounds built right into the track, going all in on that wet cave audio aesthetic. Lost Levels Act 1 is also based on the scrapped Hidden Palace zone, so it should be no surprise when the tune from that zone is directly used. I gave Lost Levels Act 1 a 7.75. It's a pretty decent tune and a departure for the soundtrack thus far, but there's something about it that's keeping me from putting it in the 8s, hence that 0.75. This Hidden Palace-based Act 1 definitely evokes the general feel of what little was found of the zone in the Sonic 2 cartridge, but it actually is a bit of a departure from that zone as well. I'll go into that at a later date. For now, let's look at this act. Act 1 is set in what looks like a giant mine, surrounded by purple gems on all sides. The playable ground is covered in a minecart rail, and the whole stage has a glimmering effect you can see in the cavernous background. Lost Levels Act 2 features an interesting tune. It's equal bits chiptune crunch mixed with a tribal-esque beat of sorts. Throw in a catchy bass and percussion that sounds like it's meant to further evoke the tribal feel, and you have this act. I gave it a 7. For whatever reason, the odd fusion doesn't entirely work for me, but I also don't think it's a bad song, hence the 7 or Green Hill tier music rating. It's a good song that I wouldn't want to hear all the time. This second act has Tails running out of that lavender cave and into a large forest. Act 2 is based on the scrapped wood zone from Sonic 2, and I think that's pretty easy to see here. Massive trees are the main visual element here as they fill the background and occasionally are ran through. There's also a treehouse, bridge, and platform aesthetic in place, as well as sections of green foliage covering the screen. Another weird thing is that parts of the stage that aren't trees appear to be the same crystalline ground that covered Act 1, except brown instead of purple. Act 3's jam might be familiar to anyone who's played their fair bit of Sonic 2. It's the Mystic Cave 2-player theme. That'd make this music rating easy, right? Nope. There are 2 versions of this song that play depending on where you are in the level. Oh boy. There's a more hard-rocking version that plays when you're in the desert region, and a chilled-out electro version for the ice parts of the stage. Here, I'll let you get a bit of the transition with the game's actual audio. Fucking neat, right? I love it when games do song transitions like this. I totally see why it isn't always feasible to record more than one version of a song that have to be the same tempo so they can transition properly, but when done, it's rad as hell. I don't think any of you will mind me giving Lost Levels Act 3 a 9.25. We run through the trees to this icy hot desert that we call Act 3, and it looks like we're still underground. Huh. I guess the forest from Act 2 is also underground. Weird. This act is based on a zone called Dust Hill Zone that also didn't make it into Sonic 2. There's a bit of contention here with the specifics though. Some people say that Dust Hill was supposed to switch between an icy stage and a desert stage like this stage does, while other people report that Dust Hill Zone was supposed to be the desert stage, and that there would be yet another zone that was scrapped that would be a palette-swapped snow stage. Anyway, first of all, the Diamond Ground from Acts 1 and 2 is back, and you'll snag it in orange or dark blue depending on the temperature. There's also cave walls with windows in them for some reason. Those don't look like structures to me. Oh well, the windows have snow on them in the cold version of the stage, so that's nifty. The background switches from glacier-like things to desert mountain hills. With all three acts having different visual aspects, I've decided to give Lost Levels an area rating of 8.5. That's pretty high, but I would have bumped it up into the 9s if they had just a bit more character to them. These variety acts also offer a few differing gimmicks. First of all, Act 1's cave system can be sort of maze-like at times, and I felt like I got turned around a bit. Act 2 has tons of verticality in it like a proper forest zone should, and Act 3 played the fastest with loops and slopes meant for sprinting. Gimmicks differ a bit between acts as well. They share some common things, but every act has at least one unique gimmick. Act 1's underground crystalline cave brings those lovable, swingable spike balls to the party. I swear, if I ever get married, these things will have to get an invite. There are also a few sections of rising floors, as well as standard fireball mortars. The big trick in Act 1 are those bizarre anti-gravity diamonds, though. They mess with Tails' momentum, and I'm still not entirely sure how they work. Sometimes they boost me forward, and sometimes I just hover in place. Act 2's giant tree-laden stage brings a slew of saw blades for Tails to dodge. There's like a lot of them, though. Besides that, there's also this neat falling platform section where you have to dodge spikes, and I'm kinda really bad at it for some reason. Act 3's Desert Tundra brings us spike pits, fireball mortars round 2, and falling rocks. Also, I know I mentioned this act had loops and stuff, but it actually has so many loops I feel the need to mention it again as a main gimmick. Offering up enough flavor per act to satisfy gave Lost Levels an 8.5. All in all, things were pretty great. There's a lot of bang here for your buck, and yet something was missing. I'm not sure what, but there's a reason this isn't in the 9s. Lost Levels has 2.5 badniks for us to look into. First, Batbrain is here from Sonic 1. Now that I've realized the entire zone is technically beneath the ground, they make way more sense being in all three acts. They fly back and forth and before the sequel, none of that swooping nonsense. The other enemy in this zone is a turtle that comes in two variations. The blue headbanded turtle will do Ryu's Hadouken Energy Blast from Street Fighter, while the white headbanded ones do Ryu's Tatsumaki and get a bunch of invincibility frames. No cool nicknames here. The Hadouken turtle will be called Ryu, and the Tatsumaki can be Ken. Woo!
Perfect!
I love the little Street Fighter nod here, and Batbrain being in a giant cave level makes sense as well. 8.75 for some truly creative baddies. Time for another scrap with Ore Boss, but first, I should mention that this boss fight arena is based on yet another scrapped Sonic 2 zone called Genocide City. Rad. I mean, can you imagine going to school at Genocide High? Fucking A, dude. The boss theme this time around is actually the tune Boss Battle 1 from Sonic Colors, so I guess we'll talk about it way down the line when I get to Sonic Colors. For now, note that it's really, really good, and apparently the boss fights in Sonic Colors are so short that most people have never heard the whole song. Now then, this fight is pretty much an upgraded version of what we got in Star Shores. Ore Boss is once again chilling in the middle, this time in a big spinning wheel. There are platforms around him that remain stationary but disappear and reappear. Spinning spike balls make yet another appearance. Also, the energy blasts in this fight have a weird property. If they hit you while they're blue, then you take damage. But if they happen to be gold, then you get rings. Kinda weird, but I won't knock potentially free rings. Anyway, just do what you did in the previous Ore Boss battle and you'll probably be okay. Probably. Also, Ore Boss gets a 7.75 for this fight, which is just a tad bit higher than the previous version. It feels like that shows that I see this version of the fight as a proper upgrade. Lost Level Zone gets a very weird feeling from me when it comes to the fun rating. On one hand, I like the differing acts and the music switching in Act 3 was the bomb. But on the other hand, I got nailed by a ton of cheap shots, and only Act 3 actually lets Tails pick up any speed. A very modest 7 is what Lost Level Zone gets. It was pretty alright in the end, but would never top my fun list. With a final rating of 8, Lost Level Zone shows that it's pretty great. I'm actually pretty pleased that 8 is what the zone ended up getting. It was a weird mix of great and okay, so this pretty good score looks like it belongs to me. I was also happy to not be harping on a zone the whole time like I did with Rocky Ride. We get ourselves another cutscene dealing with the Death Egg launch. I don't have much to say for once, so just enjoy the cute visuals, another nod to the Chaos Emeralds, and also Robotnik getting that error screen. Our next zone is Sunset Star Zone, and yes, just yes, this is my zone! Like Fepard and I sorta have a secret love affair going on when it comes to urban zones. He's got that special touch to make my panties drop. Yes, well, let's just jump in. Sunset Star Zone is an urban zone, and a mighty fine one at that. It definitely takes inspiration from Starlight Zone, but Lake puts his own personal twist on both the gameplay and visuals. Ooh, this is some smooth jazz right here in Act 1. Falk fucking outdid himself with this tune. This is the exact kind of chill beat that I can get down to. Whether it be in a posh club or skulking down the city streets at night, this is the exact tune I'd be looking to have playing. As such, Sunset Star Zone gets a music rating of 9.5. This speaks to me on a spiritual level. Act 1's visuals pretty much equally match how I feel about its tune. Sonic's running along a futuristic highway, far above a forest. There's also more highways in the background, so it really feels like we're out and about in a rich and fleshed out world. It's twilight out, so you know that night is right around the corner. The whole sight of Sonic just running fast in this backdrop makes my heart beat fast. And then you get halfway through the stage and get into the city proper. Oh my God, Sonic's still running along that blue highway, but now there are steel industrial bits of structure here and there. The background is full of beautiful future tech skyscrapers. There are these huge search planes up in the sky, probably looking for Sonic. I'll have to stop gushing for now. Act 2 of Sunset Star is bringing that improv jazz to the table now. I can imagine this type of music isn't for everyone, but my grandfather was a jazz musician, and this is the kind of stuff I grew up listening to. Everything is smooth and yet a bit sleazy as well, just how I like it. Act 2 gets a 9. That means we have 2 acts so far that have scored in the 9s for the music rating. Might be toppling Hilltop Heights for the good jams of before the sequel. Sunset Star Round 2 has us still kicking it in the city, though things are a bit darker out. Looks like it's proper nighttime now and the stars are out. The city is just looking amazing with all these visuals going on. At a few points in Act 2, Sonic ends up in a large stadium where a race is going on. There's a few billboards that have various Sega references, and the whole thing is pretty sweet. There's a bit more to Act 2, but let's save that for just a bit later. Act 3's tune is a slightly more synthy take on Act 1, and by God, it's somehow better off because of it. I really did think Act 1 was going to take the cake. But the sleazy synth, the synth stabs, and the rolling chorus we hear later into the song, it's enough to give this act a 9.75, which I believe is our current highest music rating, and also means that Sunset Star Zone has all 3 acts in the 9s. Impressive. Most impressive. The visuals here aren't any different from Act 2, I'm afraid, although more of such a great thing can't actually be bad, right? We've given traditional Sonic levels high scores for 3 acts of the same exact thing, so I hope none of you are too upset with the perfect 10 that I'm dropping here. 10. Of course, there's another thing influencing this area rating, but we actually have to wait just a bit more for that. Sunset Star Zone is a zone that lets you run fast and often. There are tons of stretches where Sonic can strut his stuff and loop-de-loops for days. Actually, I'd say that sort of gameplay is one of the main gimmicks for Sunset Star. Smooth running and loops are probably more prevalent in this zone than any other in the game. There are also these spinning platform things that you can run along to make them rise. These babies are taken from Sonic 2. Also, there's these cool anti-grav platforms that launch Sonic skyward. Okay, enough of me being coy. So Act 1 has 2 different goal signs that you can run into to end the stage, depending on which route you take. The Act 2 that you'll get afterwards is actually a totally different level. There's 2A and 2B. 2A follows the blue color scheme of the rest of the city, and I imagine this is the stage the player is expected to take on their first run. I know it's what I got the first couple of times I played. 2B is a red section of the city and actually stands out because of how different it is from Link's usual colors. The big thing I can say about 2B is that Sonic can speed through it way quicker than 2A, so it's a fun stage for someone like me. 2A also has another gimmick that I'm sure rubbed a few people the wrong way. I know I wasn't the biggest fan of it. See, when you get to that stadium section I mentioned, you need to jump around onto different platforms to collect stars. Collect all the stars and the door opens. The issue is that you have to do this multiple times, all in a row, so you can see why some people would hate having their great time sprinting through Sunset Star Zone ground to a halt. Cough, cough. All of these gimmicks add up to give Sunset Star Zone a gimmick rating of 8. That's actually the lowest score we've seen for this zone thus far, which says how much I think of it. Honestly, the zone is pretty empty when it comes to super special gimmicks that will knock your socks off, but even so, the regular gameplay being so fast and the stage layout playing to that strength kept the score good. I took a bit off for the slog that was the stadium section, but then kinda boosted things back up for the double Act 2 trick, although most of that bonus went into the perfect 10 on the area rating. Sunset Star is rocking a crisp 3.5 enemies. First up, we have 2 variations of the Spiny Badnik that we'll soon see in Sonic 2. I call the first one Flashbulb Spiny as it shoots electro orbs at Sonic. The other one is the Anti-Grav Spiny because it projects a small field that will keep Sonic from crushing it. These 2 are fairly simple bots, the Flashbulb being way more dangerous than the Anti-Grav, of course. Our next enemy is another entry into the Orbinauts series of bots. I call this one Unikage, keeping the uni part of the name and adding the Japanese word for shadow. You know, since Unikage looks like a throwing star. These dudes fly back and forth, and it really isn't that beneficial to throw down with them. Just let them do their thing and bounce off is the way to combat these dudes. Our last enemy found in Sunset Star is a rather neat one. It's Splats, the scrapped enemy from Sonic 1, except this one will deploy an energy field every few hops. Because of that, I've decided to name this type of Splats a Barrier Splats. Makes sense, right? These 4 bots were pretty strong contenders for a great enemy rating. The Spinies are effective if simple bots and make more than a few sections tense. I'm pretty partial to Orbinauts already, so another variation is super welcome. And of course, the Splat sprite getting used here touches my heart. 8.75 for making some proper enemies. Lake did a fairly good job this time at editing assets to suit his zone.
Plus, there's not a Motobug variant to be found.
Oh, also, I want to mention that they all follow that blue color scheme that I mentioned at the beginning of the video. Told you there were tons of blue bots to be battled. Our next boss fight with Robotnik commences. The tune for this throwdown is a tense electro piece that definitely keeps hints of Sunset Star Zone in there. I love that even the boss theme is keeping the zone's tune in mind. Doc's weapon of choice this time is the Blue Mobile Barge, although it is pretty yellow. I'll give you that, but the eyes are blue, so I win. So here's the deal. Robotnik is once again dropping pain projectiles as we run alongside him. There's been a lot of that going on. The barge is way too big to properly hit the Rotund Doctor though, so Sonic has to do a bit of platforming and jump up on these small ledges, which would be easy if they weren't being guarded by lasers. I'd actually say this fight is probably the easiest so far, and yet I love the platforming aspect of this. That's not always something you see in 2D titles, especially when it's Sonic climbing up a boss to nail that weak point. A little bit of creativity mixed with not stealing all my lives got the Blue Mobile Barge a boss rating of 8.25, which might be our new highest boss rating. Neato. Once again, I feel like this is a stage that you all knew I was having a blast playing. Hell, I was super pumped when I had to go back and play it again to get the footage for Act 2B. This is a gotta go fast zone that speaks to me. I give it a fun rating of 9. I will say that the lack of gimmicks mixed with the collect the stars gimmick in Act 2A brought this score down a little. Definitely had the potential to be a perfect 10. 9! Sunset Star Zone gets a 9 in the honor of our first zone to make it into the 9s with its final rating. Radical! Of course, in a way, this doesn't actually count, since this is a fan game that was made in 2012, as opposed to the early 90s titles we've covered thus far. Still, I think it's a testament to Lake Feppard that he has managed to make such a solid project for his big fan game debut, at least that I know of. I'll miss you, Sunset Star Zone. You are truly a fictional city that I wouldn't have minded living in. Looks like Tails has finally made it to the city as well, and it looks like the Death Egg is nearing completion. You guys should probably stop that or something. Tails gets to run through the city too because Lake Feppard must love me or something. Oh, joyous day, I'm gonna enjoy this. I thought I was gonna have to leave town, but Metro Madness Zone is giving me one more shot at enjoying the urban sprawl. Speaking of urban, that's what this stage is. Metro Madness Zone is pretty clearly urban, but hey, I bet you could already tell from the name, so let's dig into things. Metro Madness Zone's acts happen to have their tunes composed by a dude named Funk Fiction. Much like his namesake, he specializes in funk and has a very distinct sound to the point where I can tell a Funk Fiction song on this soundtrack pretty much right away. Falk and the others are a little bit better at blending their styles or hopping around, but Funk Fiction is king of funk. The Act 1 beat for Metro Madness is just tasty. I may have fucked up in saying Hilltop Heights could be in Third Strike because I'm pretty sure Metro Madness is the actual contender for fitting into that soundtrack. Well, I've already said what needed to be said about this track. It's funk, it's good, it's 8.75, fight me. If Sonic's time spent in Sunset Star Zone had him running on highways above the city, then Tails in Metro Madness has the young Fox running through the city proper, or at least in Act 1. I really love the visuals of Tails running around futuristic buildings in what I imagine are supposed to be alleyways. There are tons of neon signs up to give the act even more flavor. Plus, you can tell that this is supposed to be the same city from Sunset Star, as there are vague similarities. Good city Sonic levels will never be frowned upon in my rankings. Act 2 continues on with the funky beat we've been jamming to. In Funk Fiction's own words, this tune is progressive house mixed with a few shades of other house subgenres. Look, it's house. We'll keep it simple. This tune is in many ways both softer and harder than Act 1 at times, but doesn't stand out from the previous song. In fact, I actually get bits of both acts mixed up, and unless I had listened to them recently, I'd probably get them mixed up again. Because of that, I also gave Act 2 an 8.75. Two good songs that I sometimes get mixed up are definitely better than one. This act doesn't get too different from the prior one as far as visuals go. In fact, I think the only major difference is that Tails travels to a lower level of the act and it really gives off a feeling of being in the depths of a metropolis. Act 3 of Metro Madness kicks off and wow, things have gotten a lot softer. The song is so tonally different from the previous acts and I am feeling this. There's even a slight bit of tasteful dubstep, which I feel the need to reiterate is tasteful and never overstays its welcome. The dubstep is mostly here to give the feeling of truly being in the depths of this city. Anyway, Act 3 gets 9. Oh yes it does. I am all about the soundscape that Funk Fiction is building here. Act 3 immediately switches up the visuals as Tails is down in an extensive subway system, truly putting the Metro in Metro Madness, eh? I'm really liking the visuals here, even if the stage does eventually return to how it looked in the previous acts. Metro Madness also manages to score the ever-coveted 10. I love the look of this sprawling urban wonderland that Lake Feppard has created. I always think to myself when in Sonic urban stages, what happens to the people that live here? What are their lives like with all this cool tech around? How has Robotnik fucked things up for them? I love the world building that comes with this setting. Metro Madness Zone is rocking a rather large amount of gimmicks, more so than Sunset Star Zone did. First up, we have these super sweet hatches that won't open unless Tails goes over to a special pad and hovers to charge it up. There are also these weird one-way platforms that flip over. Tails can only fly through them or stand on them depending on which way they happen to be flipped at that time. Metro Madness Zone also has a weird distinction of getting these gimmicks usually reserved by amusement type zones. In this case, it has bounce walls that Tails can utilize to get higher, and bumpers that shoot him farther than any jump would. Another minor gimmick that we've seen before are the shuttle tubes. They're classic, but I love them. The final gimmick that Tails will encounter in Metro Madness is another one of those really cool ideas Lake implemented that sort of blew me away. So there are these locked doors with a button in front of them. Above them is a laser gun moving up and down, as well as a target on the far side. What you need to do is press the button when the gun is lined up with the target to unlock the door. Pretty cool, huh? Also, there are these weird fan sections at the end of Act 3 that blow Tails all around. I almost completely forgot all about them. Metro Madness Zone came to play when it came to gimmicks, and that led to it getting a 9.5 gimmick rating, our highest yet, and definitely deserved, I think. The zone had tons for Tails to interact with, and enough of the gimmicks are Lake Peppered originals. You'll find 3 baddies to engage in vicious combat with here in the lower reaches of this metropolis. Much like the previous zone, these guys are following that blue color scheme that Lake went with. The first is a badnik that acts as a modified version of Jaws. Not Jaws from Sonic 1, that's Jaws spelled with an S. The Jaws I'm talking about is the one you haven't seen yet from Sonic 3. Those are spelled with a Z. Edgy. The sprite is slightly modified with teal added in and more metal armor in places. I just call them Metro Jaws for lack of a better term. The next enemy down in the Metro are these little rods that have beady eyes and spin a hunk of metal around them with some anti-grav power. I call them mag rods. Our final enemy is a mantis-like bot that controls whirling blades through the air. We'll actually see the bot this enemy is based on in Sonic 2, although it works a little differently. I call these dudes Psycho Slicer, since the original bot's name is Slicer. Some of you may get this reference. Anyway, these guys have a hilarious sprite where they freak out if you get behind them, since they can't turn around. I quite enjoyed the baddies in Metro Madness Zone and gave them an 8.25. Metro Jaws is sorta a little boring in that he acts similar to the enemy he's based on, but I do like the minor edit to his sprite. Very sharp. Megrods may look super simple, but they're a decently fresh looking sprite. The Psycho Slicer is actually really sweet though, and I was in love with its bonus Freakout sprite. All in all, there was little to complain about, but also not enough to elevate this enemy rating further. Orboz is coming back for another beating, but this time he's chasing Tails while he's riding a tram. The tune for this brawl is a catchy and confrontational take on the beats and styles we've been hearing for the whole of Metro Madness Zone. It's fantastic and it fits. Enough said. Like I mentioned, this fight has Tails riding along on some tracks while Orboz circles around his tram. The deal here is that Tails needs to jump on 3 switches in a specific order to activate the tram's laser cannon and damage Orboz. Another trick is that Orboz can only be hurt while he's above the cannon, so timing can get a little tricky. For his trouble, Orboz lobs energy balls at Tails that need to be dodged. 8.75 for what is easily the most unique boss thus far. Sure, it's not actually that hard, which is a godsend since I need to save those lives, but it has style, and is bringing cool fight mechanics to a 2D Sonic format, which I'm sure you can now tell is something I'm all about. In the end, I suppose I just choose this fight for a high boss rating. I'm so sorry. Metro Madness Zone was a fun romp. It's an excellent zone filled with gimmicks and style. What's the fun rating? 8! 8, you say? Why a whole point less than Sunset Star Zone? Well, dear viewer, it gets an 8 for lacking as much flow as Sunset Stars did. Sure, Metro Madness has gimmicks for days, but it's also a slower paced area. I still had tons of fun playing through it though. Ooh, time for that final rating. I wonder, the scores look pretty close. Is this zone also going to be in the 9s? And 8.75. So close, and yet so far away. Still, 8.75 is an amazing final rating to get. Honestly, I'm pretty happy with this one. I loved Metro Madness, but not quite as much as I loved Sunset Star, so having it be a quarter less is pretty much perfection for me. Alright, I think we've had enough of the big city, finally. Let's go explore some other zones, shall we? So, hey guys. Since I made a 2-hour video about me talking about Sonic before the sequel, I've decided to cut it in half here. This is about the halfway point of the game, so I can't think of a better place to stop and have you guys take a break. But don't fret, don't get upset. You don't have to stop. Hell, I'd be happy if you wanted to keep going, and if that's the case, then just jump right into the next part. You'll get no judgment from me, just keep it quiet around your peers, alright? I don't want you getting bullied. Stay safe, everybody. This has been half an installment of the Sonic the Hedgehog Zones project with your affable host, Organizing Secrets.